Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our interview with Mike Norton, also known as NewNameNoah, the man who is responsible for privately recording the Mormon temple ceremonies and sharing it on the internet. I found the first hour and a half with Mike to be truly sincere, interesting, and heartfelt. If you haven't listened to part one, I strongly recommend you go back and listen to it. It was some of the most powerful, moving, informative moments of Mormon Stories in our 800-hour plus catalog. So thanks, Mike, for that. It's been really powerful so far. So now we're going to focus for the next hour and a half on your journey as an activist, how you go from being super devout and orthodox and committed and even an apologist for the church. Let me just dive right in. How do you go from that to josephlight.com and recording the temple ceremony?
January 6, 2002. I had, my wife and I were in agreement. We're leaving the church, and I felt like, I compare it to being in a burning apartment building and you live on the top floor and you realize the building's on fire. You've got several options, and one of those options is just to get out, to take care of yourself, don't worry about anybody else, just leave. Another option is to pound on every door on the way out, screaming and yelling, fire, fire, and then standing outside, making sure nobody goes back in because the building's on fire. And that's how I treated the whole Mormonism thing. When I came to the conclusion, the undeniable conclusion that the church isn't true, well, then the reality of what was true started sinking in, and I realized, okay, then they're swindling people. This is a multi-billion-dollar corporation that's lying to people, and they're misleading people. And some people will say, well, but it's a good church, it does good things. Comparatively speaking, no, it doesn't. The Methodists give nearly 30% of their tithes and income to charitable causes. The LDS Church gives less than 1%. The way they treat the LGBT community is so appalling. I have described the church in the past as a family dividing, wallet draining, soul sucking cult, and
let's get into that at the end.
Okay.
So
don't use the C word up front. So January 6, 2002, it was Fast Sunday. My wife did not go to church, but I did, and I got up and bore my testimony. I didn't say anything about the church not being true. I at the time I still believed in Christianity. I still believed in Jesus Christ, and I bore testimony about my belief in Christ and how sometimes the gospel of Christ can be a bit divisive. I read a verse in the Bible that says that it can turn mother against daughter and so on and so forth. And right after my testimony, I put, I think it was a 7 or 8 page letter, resignation letter, under the door of our bishop's office and our stake president's office, and went home and grabbed a nice big thick stack of these letters that included a cover page, because the letter was just addressed to Bishop Nelson. Then I had a cover letter for friends and family, and I hand delivered or mailed, but mostly hand delivered, about 40 copies of this letter to pretty much everybody in the ward that we cared about. All of my wife's aunts and uncles, her parents' family has a lot of members in this ward. The families that I was the home teacher for. Our home teacher, I went to their homes and literally either put it in their mailbox or in most cases taped a copy of the letter to their front door. And it just outlined the top 12 reasons why we came to the conclusion the church isn't true and we are no longer members of it. We basically said, if you ever have any activities in the ward, please invite us. We're still in the ward. If the elders quorum is getting together and helping somebody move in or out of the ward, call me. I'm the first guy that when somebody says they're moving, volunteers to help. Nobody likes to help people move, but I do. I like helping people. That's my thing. So I spread this letter around. Shortly after church, I get a phone call from the bishop asking if he and the stake president can come over and talk. I said, sure. The stake president gets right to it. He says, we may have to excommunicate you rather than honor your request to resign. And I'm like, so you're telling me I can't quit, you're going to fire me, but even though I've already quit. What's the logic behind this? And he said, well, this letter, you shared this letter to so many people in the ward. And I said, is there anything in that letter that is not true? And the bishop and the stake president kind of look at each other, and they're both like, well, no. I said, so just so I'm clear, you're going to excommunicate me for spreading the truth. He said, well, you're basically saying the church isn't true, and this is why. And I said, the church isn't true, and that is why. And he goes, but it's just, that's essentially what it's coming down to is you're telling people the church isn't true, and this is why, and therefore we might have to actually excommunicate you instead. And I said, you know what? I'm going to make this real easy for you. We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. The easy way is you honor our request, and you take our names off the records of the church, and we just go our separate ways, and everything's hunky-dory. The hard way, and I said, you know what? Hold on a second. I went in the other room, got a stake directory, and I put it down on the coffee table, and I said, the hard way, I said, I actually gave 3 people a copy of this letter before today. 3 people. Two of those 3 people came to the conclusion immediately the church isn't true, and they've already left. So the hard way is I will hand deliver a copy of this letter to every man, woman, and child in the stake, and I will be your worst fucking nightmare. I said, so you go make your phone calls, do what you got to do, and you get back with me. And he called me, a stake president called me a few hours later, and he said, talk to Salt Lake, and we're going to go ahead and honor your request to have your name removed from the records of the church. But before you do, would you be willing to talk with a very educated church historian of sorts? His name is Rhett James. He wrote the Martin Harris pageant. He's an institute teacher at Utah State, if memory serves me correctly. I think he may have the answers that you're looking for. And I said, absolutely. If you're telling me you think you have somebody that could answer our concerns, our questions, absolutely. Please, thank you. Rhett James and I exchanged letters back and forth. He wanted everything in writing, which is something he might regret because I still have what he wrote, and his responses were so moronic. There's no other word for it. This man didn't even know that one of the Kinderhook plates had been found in the 1960s, so he was still sticking with the story that if only we had those Kinderhook plates, we'd know that Joseph Smith was a prophet. And I'm just like, you're an idiot. This is the best you can do. And so I told the bishop and stake president, no, we're definitely out. This guy's an idiot. My mom had me call my uncle that teaches at BYU. He doesn't anymore, but he did at the time, Don Norton in the English department. And my uncle Don, his response essentially was, Mike, what is it that is making you want the church to not be true? Is it, are you having an affair? Is it gambling? Pornography? What is it? Because clearly, we both know the church is true, Mike. So clearly there's something that's causing you to want the church to not be true. And I was just appalled. I at one point, one conversation I had with them, I said, Don, hold on one second, would you? I called my mom, who was still a faithful member of the church, and I said, Mom, hit mute, just listen. I'm talking to Uncle Don. Just listen to what he's saying. And so I'm sorry, Don, where were we? So my mom's eavesdropping on this conversation, and he's going back to his thing of, So what is it, Mike? What unresolved sin do you have? Why do you want the church to not be true? Which was so insulting to me because, oh man, I wanted it to be true. It was devastating to me to discover it wasn't true. And for him to be saying, clearly, you know it's true, but you want it not to be, you're rationalizing why. Why, Mike? After I got off the phone with him, I said to him, my mom was still there. I said, are you there, Mom? And she said, unbelievable, unbelievable. And she realized she's the last chance I have. My mom, at the age of 69, knew that her youngest and dare I say, favorite child, she knew that she was my last hope. She had to answer my questions herself. My mom hadn't read the letter that I sent her, that I gave everybody else, because, it's anti-Mormon material. Well, she's not going to read that. So my mom pulls out this 7 or 8 page letter that I sent her. She calls me on the phone and she said, is this true? And I said, be more specific, Mom. What are you talking about? She goes, did Joseph Smith marry little girls and other men's wives? I said, yes. And these were like sexual relationships. I said, I mean, nobody's in the bedroom, but let's just say that all of the other church leaders were having sex with their teenage wives and married wives. I mean, Brigham Young, John Taylor, I mean, they all were. So I wouldn't understand how or why Joseph Smith wouldn't be. I said, yeah, the evidence seems to indicate, yes, that many, if not most of these were sexual relationships. And she says, I'm out. I'm like, wait. No, you're on page 2. And no. I said, you keep reading. It gets worse. And she goes, I don't even need to keep reading. She goes, that is absolutely disgusting. How old was he? 40? And I said, he was like 37, 38 at the time when he first started. And she says, and he was marrying little girls. I said, well, I mean, they're 14 years old. Is that a little girl? And she goes, yes. And I said, yep, marrying little girls. And she said, I'm out. I'm done. And so it's like that. My mom was the easiest one to get out. She's 69 years old, and it's instantly, it can't be true because no prophet would be sexually preying. It'd be a sexual predator with little girls. Just for her, that was a deal breaker right there. That was her shelf breaker. We talk about shelf breakers in the church, that when you have some piece of information that isn't testimony strengthening, you just kind of put it on your mental shelf. And there's a lot of information on those shelves, and in my opinion, 95% of Mormons have a shelf breaker.
Where did you get that information about Joseph's polygamy, polyandry, back in 2002? Before Mormon Stories, before, CES letter, before the internet, was really, do you remember?
Books, I think it was actually Todd Compton's in Sacred Loneliness.
Would you have read that back in
2002?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I was a big fan of Michael Quinn. I had early Mormonism and the Magic Worldview. I mean, keep in mind, I read a lot, and I loved the church. So
and the Tanners, I guess.
So the Tanners. No, I avoided them like the plague. And not until after I left the church. The only Tanner stuff that I read was, a dozen pages or so while I was on my mission, and it scared me so much I just stopped reading it.
Yeah, I remember walking with my friend Paul Mayfield around the campus of Microsoft. I had lost my faith, and I was talking to Paul about it, and I just remember him saying, "It's not the polygamy that really gets me; it's the polyandry." And I didn't even know what that word meant.
Yeah.
Because how would I have learned the meaning of that word back in 2001, 2002? So I'm just saying it wouldn't have been easy to learn about that as it versus how it is now.
I immersed myself.
Yeah, you were into it.
Okay. In fact, I think 9 out of his first 12 wives were actually married to other men. 9 of the first 12.
Yeah. So it's almost as if he had impregnated one of those wives, no one would have been able to blame him for it because there would have been an alibi of another husband who could have impregnated the wife. Like that was a way to have cover. Anyway, so your mom leaves. How do you go from that to what was your first act of sort of public activism? Was it Joseph lied? Was it recording the temple ceremony? What was your first act of public activism?
Yeah. So I kind of wrote down my story. Now, there's a website now, josephlied.com. I no longer own that. I actually turned
Start
the
with the
reins
story.
over
Start
that.
with the story. Don't worry. Go. Let's go chronology. So, what was your first act of public activism?
Making a website, josephlied.com.
What year was that?
That would have been 2002.
Okay, so
immediately.
just in that time, immediately you're like, we need a website.
I had to tell everybody. I would go on Mormon chat rooms and talk with people and pepper them with questions and say, you know, are you aware that Joseph Smith was marrying little girls? You know, did you know this and that? And I mean, I just pepper them with questions and cause people to think. And my mom left almost immediately in early 2002. My brother Tom, who's just 2 years older than me, who I was very close with, he called me up right after my mom left, and he said, I believe his exact words were, "You stupid son of a bitch. You're going to hell, and now misery loves company. You're dragging mom to hell with you. You stupid son of a bitch." He was so angry at me, and I tried to talk to him about the church. He wouldn't talk. He wouldn't listen. And every time Tom and I would talk on the phone, I'd always bring up the church stuff, and he'd get angry with me. And one day, I had a lengthy conversation with my brother Tom, and he lived in California. I was in Utah, and I kept telling him, "Let me come out and talk with you in person." And one conversation we had, his wife was eavesdropping on the call, and she thought, "Man, Mike really feels strongly about this." She's a school teacher. She's very smart. She decided to investigate herself. She started digging and was looking up on the things that I told her, or told him, that she listened to. And one day she said to my brother, "You know, Mike is always asking to come out to California and talk with us. I think we should take him up on that." And he said, "Why?" And she said, I think he might be right." And he said, "What?" She said, I think he might be right. He calls me up one day and says, "All right, you're always offering to come out and talk. Come on out and talk. Let's have a talk, but I want you to know I'm going to have two people here with us, my home teacher and my bishop." And I said, "Tom, if this is some sort of an attempt on your part to answer my questions and resolve my concerns and get me back into the church, I'm going to tell you right now, thank you. If that's your plan, and if you are successful, thank you. Because all I want is answers, Tom. And right now, I've found one answer for all of my concerns, and that is Joseph Smith was a liar. He was a charlatan. So if you've got legitimate answers that actually prove the church is true,
Yeah.
thank you in advance." He said, "No, actually, we think maybe you're right. And our bishop and my home teacher are two of my best friends. And if you're right, I want them to hear this too." So I flew out to California. My brother Tom and his wife left the church. The bishop was there for 5 minutes, and he refused to listen to me. I think he said, "Besmirch the reputation of Joseph Smith. How dare I accuse Joseph Smith of marrying little girls?"
So I know you have 1,000 fascinating stories. I'm worried that with the time we have left, we're not going to actually be able to hit some of the main things that we want to cover. So I'm going to ask you to try and stick to the question that I ask as much as you can. So with the josephlied.com, how did you decide to do a website? Did you know how to do a website?
No, I knew nothing about it. I literally learned HTML. That website that I made, I literally typed the entire
And so what was your
thing out.
intent with josephlied.com?
Just to spread the truth. I wanted people to have access to the truth just from a unique perspective, point of view.
Why the name josephlied.com and not something less offensive, something like The Truth About Joseph Smith?
I wanted something memorable. I wanted something that I would be driving down I-15 and I would see an overpass. I've got a few regrets, and one of them is I kind of felt a little bad about this. I'd see an overpass where somebody had taken like cups and put it in a chain link fence, and it would say, "Welcome home, Elder Smith." Well, I would take the exit, pull off, take all the cups down, and then rearrange them so they said josephlied.com.
That's because you wanted something memorable.
I wanted something that you're driving down the street and you see josephlied.com. that is a URL that sticks in your brain.
Did it occur to you that that would also be deeply offensive and turn
Yes.
people off from the start?
Yeah.
How did you make the strategic decision to go with offensive and memorable versus strategic and potentially more effective?
You know, I don't
It's
know
just
if
not your
I don't know if I
personality?
ever did, because my approach is still offensive and objectionable. The truth, you know, as they say, you know, the truth shall set you free, but first it'll really piss you off. and I.
So for you,
I-
Joseph Light is honest. It's
I
what
didn't.
it's
I
what
didn't
you think he
sugarcoat
did.
it. I mean, he lied.
It's just direct. You're just direct.
Joseph lied,
Okay.
and
All right.
and I just wanted
So
to be
what
direct.
was on that original website? What was the content?
I used a lot of analogies. In fact, there's a link to it. It's tinyurl.com/Joseph Lied. I used a lot of analogies. I used an analogy of, imagine if you went to a used car dealership and you
Right.
bought a car and everything's fine, and then all of a sudden you have a
a
problem.
lemon.
There's an electrical fire. You call the dealership and they go, oh, we forgot to mention the fact that we actually rolled the odometer back a couple 100,000 miles.
Like on your
FY,
mission. Like on your mission.
yeah, FY, the car, yeah. It belonged to Mormon missionaries. It had an electrical fire. It might be stolen from Mexico. We're not sure. But I mean, you'd be furious. You'd be like,
Right.
wait a second, why didn't you tell me this in advance?
Yeah.
And I felt like people that were joining the church and people who were members of the church weren't being told the truth. And the church is now making a feeble attempt to try and catch
Right.
up with the
So
essays.
did it have sections like
Oh, yeah.
Book of Abraham,
Yeah.
Kinderhook plates,
In fact,
polygamy?
the section that covers the Book of Abraham and the Kinderhook plates was titled "The Most Compelling Evidence of Fraud Yet." Another one was something like, "Where are the 2 million bodies at the Hill Cumorah?" There's dozens of church leaders, starting with Joseph Smith going forward, who made it very clear that the Hill Cumorah in New York is where the last great battle between the Nephites and Lamanites died, where 230,000 Nephites, if you count all the numbers up, died.
Right.
And
Right.
1,000 years before that, 2 million Jaredites
Right.
died at the same location.
So you had a section on Book of Mormon, historicity.
Yeah, I've got a section on the first vision. Where is
vision.
God and Jesus Christ in the first vision? There's multiple versions, and the church. This is a little known fact. Most members of the church, up until about the 1880s, were not under the impression that God and Jesus Christ appeared to Joseph Smith in the Sacred Grove. That's a story that kind of morphed. A lot of them in the early days thought it was Mormon and Moroni.
Right. So just to be clear, before Mormon Stories, before CES Letter, before Mormon Think, you created a website that tried to aggregate the central problems with the church and to educate people.
It
about
was
them.
very effective.
And that was josephlight.com.
Yeah.
So what, did you put your real name on the website?
I did. Oh yeah, I put my whole story on there. In fact, I think I had a section titled "The Whole Story of Why I Left Mormonism."
And you told your whole story there.
I talk about everything.
Okay.
Everything.
What was the response to that website?
A lot of emails? There's a guy named Rob Savolka, super nice guy. He's a Christian evangelist. He's not an ex-Mormon, never has been, but he's passionate about educating people about Mormonism. And Rob Savolka made up a sign that said josephlied.com. I've never been the Manti.
Oh, that wasn't you.
No, it wasn't me. And I would get these emails from people saying, yeah, I saw you standing outside of Temple Square with your sign. And I'm like, because my email address at times like Mike at josephlied.com or something. So people would go to josephlied.com, they click on the email me thing, and they would, either curse me or thank me for, seeing this sign. Sometimes it would say, I saw a sign on an overpass that had your URL. And I'm like, that wasn't me, but who is this guy standing outside of the temple holding up signs that say josephlied.com? I didn't find out for like a year and a half.
So he was your first missionary, basically. So, all right. So,
Wait, another thing I should say, that something that was very important to me, very early on, I obtained a blank temple recommend. Now, this is back before they had the barcodes on the recommends. Richard Packham actually gave it to me. He was the very first president of the Ex-Mormon Foundation, and I made it clear to him I need a temple recommend because I want to make copies for reasons. And he sent me one. I don't know how he got it. I never did ask. I didn't care. I went to Kinko's. I made 100 color copies of it. And then I started going to Mormon websites, Mormon chat rooms, and I'd look for people that would say, I'm so devastated. My daughter is getting married in the temple in 3 months, and I can't go because I'm not worthy. No, I can't go because I don't pay tithing. I can't go because I don't believe anymore. And I would contact them privately, and I would say, I can give you a recommend. And a lot of these people.
But I just want to make a point. That's one of the most controversial things that you've done. But I'm seeing your eyes tear up, and I just want to make clear that what I'm hearing from you say is you were moved and heartbroken at how the church used temple access and temple worthiness as a way to divide families and exclude people. And that was the emotional motivation for you sharing temple recommends. I'm not saying it's justified, but I'm saying you were coming from a place of empathy and sadness for the way the church's policies were hurting people. Is that true? Am I putting words
Absolutely.
in your mouth?
No. I just thought to myself, I still believed in Christ, and I thought, I just couldn't comprehend the possibility that Jesus Christ would tell parents, "Oh, you haven't given enough money to the church, so I'm sorry you can't attend your only child's wedding. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." A lot of these people, a vast majority actually, told me that their bishops told them, the few that actually made an attempt to get a recommend, in almost every case, they were told you needed to catch up on your tithing. And in most cases, they were given an actual number. The very first person I gave a recommend to told me his bishop gave him a number. I said, now you got me curious. How much is it? It was like $22,000. He made a lot of money. He made good money, but he said he refused to pay the tithing because he was privy to, this is 2002, he knew how much the general authorities were getting paid. And he didn't want to contribute to that, so he flatly refused to do it. His wife didn't know, but he came to me and said, a mutual friend of ours tells me you might be able to get me a temple recommend, and my wife. And I said, yeah. I said, and he told me, the bishop wants $22,000 to catch up on our tithing. I jokingly said, this is actually the very first one, I jokingly said, I could do it for $5,000. And he said, will you take a check? And I said, oh, no, I was totally joking about that. And he got angry, and he said, okay, so am I wasting my time then? I was told you could help me out. And I said, oh, no, I can help you with the recommends. I just won't take your money for it. I'd be no better than the church if I did that. So, yeah, I'll give you recommends. I said, I need your full name, your wife's name, the name of your bishop, the name of your stake president, the name of your ward, and your stake. And he got a little, why? What do you need all that for? And I said, when you go into that temple, your recommend will be so perfect that Elohim himself wouldn't discern that it wasn't legitimate. I said, your bishop's name will be on that recommend. Your stake and your word will be on it. I mean, let's go with the worst case scenario. You show up at the temple, and just so happens the guy working the recommend desk, he used to be in your ward 3 weeks ago. Now you're screwed because your bishop's name's not on it and your stake president. I said, I was the Mark Hoffman of forged temple recommends. Right. So I mean, they had perforation marks on them, so like it was torn out of a book. I was anal retentive of my temple recommends.
And just to be clear, I'm being really prescriptive in this interview because I want to make sure we can tell your full story.
Yeah.
So I hope you and others don't take offense that I'm being so
Sure.
prescriptive, because I don't want to miss some of the key stuff. So how many recommends do you think you gave out or forged or whatever?
From 2002 to mid to late 2005, a little over 100.
Okay. And you didn't charge for them?
No,
Okay.
Never. In fact, not only did I not charge for them, there's a lot of them that I would like mail to somebody overnight, and I never asked for
Okay.
it.
Really quick, you've talked about Joseph lying and the church lying. If somebody were to say, well, your forging is lying,
Yep.
like, you're lying.
Yep.
So what if somebody were to say that's hypocritical?
My response would be, you know what? undercover police lie all the time to drug dealers, to rapists, to murderers. You know, I know two wrongs don't make a right. Sometimes a second wrong very much does make a right. You know, it is not wrong, in my opinion, to make a forged temple recommend and give it to a mother who wants to see her only daughter get married in the temple. I remember one woman, I handed her a recommend, and she said, I just want you to know that I still believe the church is true. And I said, I just want you to know I don't care, and I hope you have a wonderful time and it's a beautiful wedding. I just don't care.
Okay.
So there was a slight change. Late 2005, early 2006, I get a phone call from an old friend of mine who worked for church security, and he said, well, you've done it now. Do you have any idea how much you just cost the church? And I was joking. I thought maybe a temple had burned down, and he was accusing me of it. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, they have added a security feature to the temple recommends, and they're putting computers in every temple in the world, and it's costing them millions. And they're doing it because of you, because they know you're giving these temple recommends out, and they're going to stop that. And I said, well, so what's the security measure? And when he told me, we both laughed. Because there's a little known fact that clearly the church security was unaware of. I have Asperger's. I'm an Aspie. I jokingly say I put the ass in Asperger's. Aspies sometimes, it's not uncommon for us to get little obsessions. So we might be obsessed with something for a week, 2 weeks, it might be a month, it might be a year, and just as quickly as the obsession began, it could disappear and you're off to another obsession. Well, in the mid-1970s, maybe 76, 77, I went to the supermarket with my mom, and they have this laser beams, and they're scanning these barcodes, and I was fascinated by this. We went home. I remember the first time I saw that. I went home, I peeled off the label from like a can of peas, and I sat down with a pen and a ruler and this barcode, and I'm copying the barcode as best as I could. The next time we went to the supermarket, I said to my mom, get a can of peas. And so I'm holding the can of peas when we get to the check stand, and I said to the guy, can you do me a favor? I'm like 8 or 9, maybe 10. I said, can you do me a favor? Instead of scanning this can of peas, will you scan this instead? And it was my hand-drawn barcode. And he said, what is that? And I go, I copied the barcode. And he said, it's not going to work. This is a laser beam. It doesn't, well, you can't just copy the barcode. And I go, all right. He goes, give it to me. So the guy takes my little thing, beep, 69-cent can of peas. He goes, that's pretty good. And I was obsessed. So for about a year and a half, I drew barcodes constantly.
So did you do that with the temple recommends? Did you end up?
So when they first created their little security measure to keep me out, probably the first 15 or 20 recommends I gave out to people that wanted to see the kid get married in the temple, I hand drew a barcode on there, and I got it. What I do is I go to Deseret Book. I would lounge around and wait until somebody was buying garments. And I'd have my phone, kind of like I said, I'd have a book, I'd have my phone, and I'd hit record, and I'd lounge around, kind of linger around by the cash register. I'd just wait for them to pull out the temple recommend and show it to them. All I needed was a number. If I had the number below that recommend, below that barcode, I could draw the barcode. I had a computer program that would basically show me, you put this number in, this is the barcode, and I just copy the barcode. So my first...
So you got around the church
Oh,
security.
yeah. It was ironic that the one security feature they put into place...
They cost millions.
Yeah. Was like, they may as well have said, the password to get in is Mike Norton's new name. I mean, I actually used to have right here, I used to have a barcode tattooed on my arm that I drew. So it was just, the irony was not lost on me.
So why'd you stop doing temple recommends?
I didn't. In fact, Now,
You still haven't stopped?
oh heavens no. Now I stopped. In fact, let's see. There's one,
You're still doing it?
2, 3, 4, 5. Let's see, 6, 7. All of these here are actually valid, except for that one. This one's not valid. This is the one I got last year. A bishop handed me this one, but I don't draw them so much anymore because
Wait, those are valid?
Oh yeah, these are all valid.
They would work
Except
right
for-
now?
Yes. Yeah, anyone else.
You put these barcodes on here?
Oh, that's not all of them. I got that's yeah, those. No. Now I want to clarify something. Those ones are not hand-drawn barcodes. I got to the point where after a while I realized.
So you're still doing this?
With the oh yeah, I've got dozens of them.
All right, you made your point. Okay, so good luck, church. You got a little more money to spend.
Yeah, they need to add a microchip. You know, people have said, one of these days they're gonna add, they're gonna require a photo ID. That won't stop me.
Okay.
Oh yeah, no. Yeah. So
Okay, all right. So when did you first record? What made you want to record the temple ceremony? When was the first time you recorded the temple ceremony?
2011.
Okay, so so then let's not jump to
Oh,
there
wait.
yet.
In 2005, I should say, in 2005, they changed the washing and anointing ceremony. January 18th, 2005, I was reading online. There's a lot of talk around the ex-Mormon water cooler online that something big is going on in the initiatory, and it's starting January 18th. So January 18th, 2005, I took one of my recommends and went to the Jordan River Temple, and my plan was to document the new changes to the washing and anointing ceremony. The problem is, you're practically naked in there. Where am I going to hide a recorder for this? So my plan was a painful one. I figured I would go and do washing and anointings. I'd go through a round of 5 or 10 names, go back to my locker, write down as much of the new script as possible, go back and do 5 or 10 more names, go back to my locker and write it down, and I figured I'd spend the next 8 hours getting doused in oil and water, writing down every word of the new of the washing and anointing ceremony. I did the first round, was about ready to head to my locker, and I see this thing that says study booth. And I'm like, oh, it can't be that easy. I pop my head in the study booth, and I see these 2 guys in there. They're both holding like laminated copies of the new script. So I go to my locker, change back into my street clothes. I walk back in. I said to one of the gentlemen, excuse me, can I see that for a second? He said, sure. He hands me this laminated copy of the new washing and anointing ceremony. They should have advertised it as, look, Ma, no more naked touching. Because that day they stopped touching you all over your body. It was literally just, swipe of water on your head. You'd still wear the poncho, but the shield, but you were wearing your garments from the very beginning. The shields were more conservative. They weren't, open on the sides.
I just want to say that, you're joking about it.
Yeah.
When I went through the washings and anointings for the first time, I was highly uncomfortable with the
Oh,
fact
so was I.
that there was this very thin sheet in front and back. And
Very
you're
thin.
completely naked on the sides, and this old man was getting this oil and touching my loin, touching my chest. It felt sexually abusive to me at the time.
The shield makes hospital gowns seem downright bulky.
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad.
You would have to hold the sides together when you walked, or you're flapping in the breeze.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
So
it
I was very
it-
uncomfortable with it as well.
I mean, for every bit of sacrilege you show, I think there really are disturbing, significant, meaningful issues that you're trying to address. And I'm just going to say, we'll get to this later, sometimes your bluster doesn't accurately convey the sincerity and the severity of the issues you're trying to address.
I agree.
And in this case, this one, I'm connecting with it emotionally. As you're making jokes, I'm thinking about how I felt when this old man was touching me in naked places.
And nobody warned you. Nobody, at least
No,
with me,
but,
nobody told me you're going to go through a ceremony where you'll be completely naked, except you'll be wearing a handkerchief, essentially, and you'll have 2 strangers touching you all over your body.
oil.
And then later on, you'll be pantomiming slitting your own throat.
Yeah, we get that.
Okay, nobody warned me.
And it is highly disturbing.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so So you started the Church Is Not True podcast 2004 or 2005?
2005.
So it was right a month or two before I started.
Yeah, June. I think it's June of 2005.
Huh.
We started doing that.
Because I thought Mormon Stories started before then.
No,
So-
I think we started just a few months before you, because
Okay.
like
How did that happen?
I was, my first wife and I got divorced. I was married to my second wife, who was technically a member of the church. She didn't believe anymore, but she was technically a member of the church. She was assigned a home teacher. Oh, that poor bastard. Her home teacher became my podcast partner. That
was Hiram.
Yep.
Hiram's not his real name.
Hiram is not his real name. And to the, honestly, if he sees this, I hope he reaches out to me. I have not talked with him in probably 10 years. I have no idea where he is.
At some point, he asked me. Let's not get to that
Yeah.
yet. So how'd you get the idea of starting a Mormon-themed podcast?
It was Hiram's idea. He felt like, I mean, he had all the technology, he had all the equipment in his house. It was a block and a half from my house. I mean, he was my wife's home teacher
And where were you living at the time?
in Layton.
Okay, Layton,
So he just kind of brought up this idea.
Had you listened to any Mormon-themed podcasts before then?
No.
There was Catholic Mormon.
Was there ones
There
before
was
that?
Catholic Mormon. There was This Mormon Life.
Yeah, no, I'd never listened to any
Yeah,
podcasts. In
never-
fact, to this day, I don't, my attitude is, I've lived this. I don't need to relive it by watching. You've done 805.
No, don't worry about that.
I've seen like 3 episodes
That's
of Mormon
fine.
Stories.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
just-
but back to your story. So you start this podcast with Hiram. How many episodes did you do?
20-ish.
Why did you end?
I don't even remember. Hiram got married in the temple. Literally the day after he and his wife got married in the temple, they submitted a resignation letter. He got the fastest. I think he went through a lawyer. I know he sent it next to air. 7 days after he was married in the temple, he had confirmation that he and his wife were no longer members of the
They
church.
just wanted to do the temple ceremony to avoid.
They just went through the
collateral
motions
social
with the
damage.
family. Yeah, they didn't want to ruin it for their family and all that. So they just went through it, but they were done. And so they went through the temple and got married, and then the next day resigned from the church.
What was it like doing the podcast?
It was like this, but with far less people.
Yeah.
It was me and Hiram, and we did interviews. We'd call people. Sometimes we'd have a person we were interviewing actually in the room with us. But like Tal Bachman, we did 2 episodes of Tal Bachman, who was one of my personal favorite episodes, and had a great conversation. And one of our episodes, which kind of inspired some of the work that I do now, we did a tour of the Beehive House in Salt Lake and asked the sister missionaries doing the tour some rather uncomfortable questions.
And you recorded it.
And we recorded it.
Yeah.
So there's the Beehive House
And you
tour
shared it on your podcast.
episode. When I left back to the 2005 thing, when I left the temple with this laminated copy of the new washing and anointing ceremony, I drove straight to the Utah Lighthouse Ministry. I had Sandra Tanner make a photocopy of it, and I gave her the copy and kept the original. And I can't emphasize enough, that is illegal. It is a felony, and it's burglary. And I dare church security or anybody in the church to have me arrested. Just have me arrested. Charge me with a crime.
Wait, why are you being reckless? Like, why are you saying that?
There is nothing I would enjoy more than having the church prosecute me for any crime.
Okay, got it. So it's a way to give negative attention to the church.
Yeah, I would happily spend 6 months in jail to cause, and it wouldn't be 6 months. I mean, the nice thing is the felony of stealing the laminated copy, which it's technically a felony. I'm pretty sure the statute of limitations is up on that. If it's not, then again, to church security, arrest me,
Right,
file charges.
right. So why did
They
you
won't.
stop?
They won't because they're afraid. That's the difference between me and a lot of ex-Mormons. A lot of ex-Mormons are afraid of the church. There's a lot of people that they're afraid of what I would say. They don't want to offend people. They tiptoe on eggshells. I am not afraid of the church. To be frank, I think the church is afraid of me, and they should be. Because I am far from done. Far from done.
All right, we'll get there in a second.
Yeah.
So, podcasts.
Oh, wait. 2011, I was telling you.
No, I don't want to jump to 2011
okay.
yet.
All right.
So podcasts have made a huge contribution to Mormonism. You were one of the pioneers, and you just stopped. Why did you stop? You don't remember.
I know. I think it was a time commitment thing. I think that Hiram was newly married, and it just. I think it was a combination of Hiram having a life and me being lazy. I don't know. I just
That's
felt
fine.
like we weren't reaching a lot of people, so it just stopped.
All right. Well, you made me want to do Mormon Stories.
No, there you go. See,
Yeah.
so one person inspires.
Assuming you were before Mormon Stories, I'm not sure about that, but anyway, you helped shape what I ended up doing.
Well, like I said,
in
Hiram
different
was the third person you interviewed for Mormon Stories.
Right.
And he
So it must
specifically
have
talked
been,
about
yeah.
having me on someday. And
So it was right there. Okay, so I got the sense that you kind of disappeared for a while after you ended the podcast. Is that true? In terms
kind
of your
yeah,
activism?
It wasn't. Yeah, actually, what happened was my second wife and I got divorced. Got married a third time, but before I got married the third time, I fell in love with a woman who, for the first time in my life, I was dating a woman who not only was not a Mormon, she had never been a Mormon, had nothing to do with Mormonism, and I just, I kind of got burned out. I was spending so much time online answering emails and stuff, and I just felt like when I turned the URL, the Joseph Lied URL over to Rob Savolka, he's a good guy. Granted, he has this Christian angle and all that, and he's one of those that believes that Mormons are going to hell because they don't believe in the right Jesus, and that's fine for him. I just don't believe that. I don't think Mormons are going to hell. I don't really believe in hell, but
So you turned that over?
so I turned it over to him, and I just kind of moved on,
How many years were you sort of out of the Mormon activism space?
I would say probably from around 2000. I would say 2007, 2008, 2009, 10, and most of 2011. Almost 5 years.
You were just kind of out of it.
Really, I really was.
Were you still doing the Temple Recommends, or?
Yes.
Okay, you're still doing that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what brought you back into Mormon activism?
A little fella named Mitt Romney.
So this would have been 2007, 2008.
No, actually, 2000. I guess it was 2000. Was it 2008? No, I think it was 2012. It was 2011. Mitt Romney's essentially going to be the GOP candidate for president, and I realized, holy crap, our next president of the United States could be a man who has sworn an oath to consecrate all of his time, talents, energy, everything that he has or ever will have
I think he first ran for the 2008 election.
Well,
is that right?
if he did, it wasn't a concern to me at the time.
Okay.
But 2011, he was a
so
serious
in his second
candidate.
run, because he won the Republican nomination.
Yeah.
So that's when you got serious. So 2011-ish.
I knew that I couldn't just sit by and do nothing, knowing that the next president of the United States might have been a man that swore to obey the law of consecration. And
you probably saw it as an opportunity to harness the media attention.
Oh yeah.
To
and keep in mind, for several years in the 1990s, I worked as a private investigator, and one of my specialties was surveillance. I would do surveillance on people who were workman comp claims. I'd follow some poor schmuck to the bowling alley and catch him bowling with a 13-pound ball when he told the court that he couldn't carry more than 5 pounds. And I was pretty good at it, but I did it for a short period of time. But I knew that I had the ability to record the ceremony, the temple ceremonies, and I had the desire, I had the ability, and I realized nobody else is doing this, and it needs to be done. So I went to the temple, and actually I hid a cell phone in a book, and it was actually this book.
Show the camera.
I thought it was appropriate. It's Variable Clouds, Occasional Rain with a Promise of Sunshine by Paul H. Dunn. And the camera was actually hidden behind his tie. I actually hollowed out the book, you can see there, and had my iPhone 3, I think, in there.
Show the camera really clearly.
So you can
the inside. So you've carved out.
and then
carved
see,
out the
there's that.
inside of Paul Dunn's book.
So I So
you've got a little hole. This is for the audio listeners. You've got a little hole
Yeah.
in the book cover
So the hole is
where the camera can see through the hole of the back of the
Exactly.
book.
And so what I did is
And you've got the pages carved out where the iPod can fit in the book.
perfectly, fit in there perfectly.
So you can be using that as a way to record episodes. And from the back, I can't see through the hole.
No.
I can't even see that there is a hole.
And imagine there's a black camera there, so you really can't see it at all. And so I stuck this inside my temple packet, and I'm sitting there in the front row of the temple. And as soon as the ceremony started, I just pulled my Paul H. Dunn book out of my temple packet. I opened it up to, let's see, what page was it? I opened it up to chapter 17, A Tonic for Tired Parents. And I have a little thing carved out there because I had to swipe it over to unlock it, then push the power button, and I needed to be able to see whether or not it was actually recording. So I just casually, and I had the light turned way down low, I just went swipe, blink, and I'd practice it a dozen times to make sure that it'd be perfect. And the video camera's recording, and then it just went like that, and just sat there and kind of aimed it at the camera, at the screen. That was the very first time I recorded the endowment ceremony, recorded in the temple, and I did it. Since then I've recorded in at least 5 different temples, probably a total of 40 times. Some were more meaningful than others. I was contacted by a.
Oh, wait, before you do that. So, as you're scheming and planning this, connect the dots at a super high level. You're thinking, Mitt Romney's running for president. I want to record the temple ceremony. And if I do and put it online, what will happen?
People will see that the GOP candidate for president of the United States is a cult member who has sworn an oath to consecrate everything he has or ever will have, including his time and talents, to the building up of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And
you thought that if they saw that and concluded that, then what would happen?
They wouldn't vote for him.
You didn't. So your goal was to keep him from getting elected.
Absolutely.
Because you were fearful of what?
Fearful of having a man who's sworn the oath of consecration sitting in the Oval Office.
That would be bad. Why?
Because there's 15 old men in Salt Lake City who he reveres as prophets, seers, and revelators. And if any one of these 15 men wanted to get the ball rolling on the apocalypse, all they have to do is make one phone call.
But seriously, and we can talk about this later, but John F. Kennedy was Catholic. He believed in a pope.
Yeah.
The world didn't end.
There's a huge difference between your run-of-the-mill Catholic and their relationship with the Pope and your TBM, True Blue Mormon. In my opinion, right now in the world, there are at least, and this is being super conservative, at least 500,000 people that if Thomas S. Monson, 90-year-old man, said, sell everything you have for pennies on the dollar, pack up and move to Independence, Missouri, because the second coming of Jesus Christ is right around the corner. I believe at least 500,000 people would pack up everything they have, sell everything they have, and they would move to Jackson County, Missouri. So that's 500,000 people.
But the church has stopped doing crazy things like that.
Have they? Have they now? The church has said things. Right now we have a horrific epidemic in Utah. The number one cause of death of children between the ages of 10 and 17 is suicide. And a lot of these are LGBTQ children. And the church is aware of this. And their response, is a quote I'd like to share. Dallin H. Oaks was asked in an interview by Public Affairs. This is a public interview. They asked him, at what point does showing love cross the line into inadvertently endorsing behavior? If a gay son says, well, if you love me, can I bring my partner to our home to visit? Can we come for holidays? Dallin H. Oaks, an alleged apostle of Jesus Christ, said, I can imagine that in most circumstances the parents would say, please don't do that. Please don't put us in that position. I can also imagine some circumstances in which it might be possible to say, yes, come, but don't expect to stay overnight. Don't expect to be a lengthy house guest. Don't expect us to take you out and introduce you to our friends or to deal with you in a public situation that would imply our approval of your partnership. There's kids killing themselves. And the leaders of this church are saying things that are pushing those kids and causing them to realize God doesn't love me the way I am. And there was one particular incident that I've shared before. I shared it online. Well, I didn't share it online, actually. I shared it in a private Facebook group, and somebody took a snippet of that conversation and posted it online. A few years ago, I had a kid call me named Stephen, and the phone call was unusual. First thing he said to me was, is this new name Noah? I said, yeah. My name's Mike. You can call me Mike. And he said, yeah, I just wanted to call and tell you that you saved my life today, and say thanks. Obviously, that caught my attention. I said, how so? What are you talking about? And he told me a story. He was 15 years old. Was going to turn 16, I think, in 3 days. And he knew he was gay ever since he was a little kid. He told his parents at a young age. His parents got divorced. He was living with his mom. His mother was very opposed to him being gay. A few days before he turned 12 years old, he went in to the bishop for a worthiness interview to be a deacon. And the first thing the bishop said, and as far as this kid knew, nobody knew that he was gay but him, his mom, and his dad. First thing the bishop says is, so your mother tells me you think you're gay. Let's talk about that. And he told me if I had a gun, I would have killed myself on the spot. He was mortified. He was horrified. And what he thought was going to be a 10-minute worthiness interview turned into a 40-minute grilling about his sexuality. 2 years later, he made it through that, but 2 years later, he's going to be a teacher. Same bishop, and he said, if I thought my interview to be a deacon was bad, I had no idea what I was walking into when I became a teacher. Because now I'd gone through puberty, and the bishop knew that I had to have acted on my same-sex attraction, and no matter what I said to him, he wasn't taking no as an answer. He said, I'd never touched another boy, never held hands, never kissed another boy, but he didn't take that as the answer. He knew I was lying. Surely I must have done something by now. And he said, I vowed at that point, I will never do that again. I will never sit down with him and have that conversation again. It was very uncomfortable for him. A year goes by, a few more months goes by. He realizes he was about 15 years and 3 months old, and he devised a plan. He tell his mom, I'm not going to meet with a bishop. I'm not going to interview to be a priest. That wasn't an option. So he found an alternative option. He'd just kill himself. He was going to kill himself before he turned 16. And 16, his interview at the age of 16 was the deadline for him. He started stealing Ambien from his mother without her knowing about it, and he accumulated a pretty hefty little stack of Ambien. And less than a week before he turned 16 years old, his plan was to come home from school on a Friday. He'd get home 1:30. He'd go in his room. He'd take this stack of Ambien. He'd lock his door. He'd barricade the door, and he'd just go to sleep. He figured, as a single mom, she'd get home around 6 o'clock. She'd make dinner. Somewhere around 6:30, she'd call him down for dinner. He wouldn't answer. She'd go up. The door would be locked. Maybe she'd call the fire department to get in his room. He just knew that locking the door and barricading it would buy him more time to die. So he gets home from school. He's got a stack of Ambien sitting there, and he made one last-ditch effort to try and find a talk by any church member ever that was written for his mother. A talk that he could show his mom and say, look, the general authorities say just love your kid no matter what. If your kid's gay, just love him. But he was finding just the opposite. He was finding horrible talks. And probably minutes to go before he decides to end his life, he says, I found this video of temple rituals. And all of a sudden, he says, I started laughing. He says, Mike, do you have any bullies? Have you ever had a bully? And I said, oh, sure. In school, he said, well, my bullies are my mother and my bishop. And I wasn't going to be bullied anymore. And I suddenly realized these people, they're silly little nonsensical handshakes and it's nonsense. They're little silly outfits and the men are wearing hats that are tied to their shoulder. He said, it was just so ridiculous to me that I realized right then and there, oh, I'm not going anywhere. He said, I flushed the pills down the toilet, I packed a bag, and I waited for my mom to get home. He told me his best friend was gay. He emphasized, he is my best friend, he is not my boyfriend. And my best friend's mom told me several years ago, well, a couple years before, that if you ever need a place to stay, Stephen, if you ever need a sanctuary, you are welcome in our home. Not for just a day or a week or a month, but years if need be. His best friend's mom knew Stephen's situation with his mother. And his mom got home, and if you're... This may be a little offensive to some Mormons, but it's what he said. He had a bag packed. His mom walked in the kitchen door, and he told me, I raised my hands in the air, and I said, oh, Mom, hear the words of my mouth. Oh, Mom, hear the words of my mouth. Oh, Mom, hear the words of my mouth. He said, I had a big speech prepared for, and he didn't even need to finish the third, oh, Mom, hear the words of my mouth. His mom pointed at the door and said, get out of my house. And he said, gladly. And he grabbed his bag and he walked to his friend's house. He told me, this is going to sound kind of gay. He said, I think I skipped. I think I skipped to my friend's house. His friend's mom welcoming him with open arms. And he said, so that was earlier today, and I'm telling my friend the whole story, and my friend told me, that guy saved your life. You should call him. Because his friend was watching the video with him, and he saw my phone number. I post my phone number online all the time. Because I want people like Stephen to be able to reach me. I want them, if they have questions, to be able to call. There's a lot of kids that post comments on my videos and say, this is so fake. There was another one, actually, that was very, very meaningful to me. In 2015, there was an article in the Denver Post about a transgender girl named Allison. This is from the article in the Denver Post. It says, the night before Allison was supposed to start her sophomore year of high school, she emerged from her room and handed her parents a handwritten note. I feel like killing myself, it said. The family spent the night in an emergency room where the staff pointed out to Vicky and Eric, her parents, that they were alternating between calling her Allison and her birth name. They referred to it as the worst night of their lives. They learned that 57% of transgender youth without parental support try to kill themselves, compared with 4% who have strong parental support. Shortly after that, it says, half a year before she considered that she was transgender, Allison began questioning her belief in the Mormon Church. Her research on the Latter-day Saints was sparked by her older brother, Kevin, who showed her a video he found on Reddit of a temple ceremony where Mormons in ceremonial gowns taught each other handshakes needed to enter heaven. She realized she no longer believed in the same God. That discovery at 15 years old rocked her world. And here's a quote, when the foundation of how you think the world works is destroyed, the entire building collapses. You have to put things back together in a way that they won't topple again. You have to figure out who you are and what works and what is right. When that happened, I found a lot of pieces that didn't fit. The intense self-reflection, although challenging, energized her. I started being passionate. I started talking more. I no longer just sat in my head all the time. She said, there was so much that was just buried, and I brought it all up for good and for bad. Her brother noticed too. She went from being this person who was very quiet and disconnected to all of a sudden a person who was passionate about a lot of things. Allison Kluzek, I believe is her name. Sometimes I had a guy last year say to me, angry Mormon, he said, I don't know how you sleep at night. And I said, horribly. I sleep horribly. I take Ambien every night. I take Xanax. Every night when I go to bed, I take a Xanax and an Ambien. Ambien to put me to sleep, Xanax to stop my mind from racing, because all I can think about is, where's the next Stephen? How can I help the next Allison? Because right now, there's children that are convinced death is the only answer, because their God doesn't accept them for how they are and who they are. In June of this year, I got a private message from somebody saying, I have a video of a girl bearing her testimony in church, coming out as gay, and they shut her mic off. And I'm wondering if you could maybe blur the faces in this video. And I watched it, and I sobbed. Savannah, that is the bravest kid, bravest person I've ever met in my life. Not only did I blur the faces, but I told the person who gave it to me, there were two minors, two children recorded her testimony. I've got both angles of her testimony. I said, not only can I blur the faces, I have a YouTube channel. I've got a Twitter account. I've got 12,000 subscribers. I said, let me share it. Let me post it online. I said, I really think a lot of people would see this, because watching the video, I'll tell you, maybe 50 people in the actual chapel that day were paying attention to what she was saying. When she dropped the L-bomb and said lesbian, you see a few heads pop up, but most people weren't really paying attention. And then 2 minutes into her 2.5-minute testimony, they cut her mic off. I posted that video online on June 14th to give you a perspective of how insignificant Mormonism is and how much love there is in the world for people like Savannah. 5 years ago this week, I posted Behind the Veil online.
That was the first.
That wasn't the first one. I posted Behind the Veil 3 weeks before the presidential election, but it was up there. I mean, I posted the first one, I think, in August of 2012. October 16th, I posted Behind the Veil 3 weeks before the presidential election. And since then, I posted there's about 70 videos out there. All of my videos combined in 5 years have gotten about 5 million views. Savannah's testimony got 5 million views in 5 days. Now, not on my channel. I immediately knew the church is not going to like this one, and there may be some legal repercussions. They might try some loophole. So I started having all these media requests pouring in via email saying, can we share your video? I mean, big ones, CNN and I mean, the New York Times covered it, the Chicago Tribune, the Daily Mirror, hundreds and hundreds of newspapers around the world were publishing this and posting it on Twitter and what have you. And 48 hours into this, I was telling them, you can use the footage, but host it on your own site. You need to make a copy of it, put it on your own site, and host it on your own site.
Because the church takes these things down. They contact YouTube behind the scenes.
Yep. Oh yeah.
And they shut it down.
Yeah, they definitely make efforts. And they, and in this case, I was right. They found a little loophole that I won't go into detail on because I'm not entirely sure even if the church truly understands what that loophole was. But there was a loophole, and they were able to get my video shut down temporarily, but it was too late. The cat was out of the bag. I posted it online June 14th. by the end of the day on June 30th, I'd been keeping track and counting and watching. By the end of the day on June 30th, 100 million people had seen Savannah's testimony. By the end of August of this year, so after 2.5 months, 300 million people had seen her testimony or seen her story. 300 million people in 2.5 months. Compare that to all of my videos combined in 5 years. I've gotten 5 million views. What that tells me is, for the most part, most of the world doesn't care about Mormonism. We could care less. But a majority of good, decent people in the world are disturbed by seeing a 12-year-old child get up, talk about how she believes God loves her the way she is. God doesn't make mistakes. She wants to be happy. She wants to have a relationship, a good job. And she didn't say anything that was offensive. Nobody in their right mind could read the transcript of what she said and take offense. But the stake president sitting on the stand that day took offense, and he shut it off. And that was a big mistake. They could have. The irony is, Savannah had her friends recording it because she thought it would be a positive experience. She wanted to be able to show people, look, you can be gay and be Mormon. Look, here I am standing in church, I'm bearing my testimony, and everything's fine. The stake president could have gotten up and put his arm around her and said, brothers and sisters, this is how Heavenly Father wants us to, He loves all of us unconditionally, and Savannah is no different. But he didn't do that. He sent a very clear message, and some people say, well, that's just one person. No, that stake president is very, very much representative of the position the church has taken on the LGBTQ community. I met Savannah for the first time. Oh, by the way, I don't think she knows this yet. Today, Savannah's she's in California with her parents, and she's at a taping of the Ellen DeGeneres show. Now, I don't know if there's plans for her to meet Ellen. I suspect there is, but I don't think Savannah even knows yet, because it's not till like 1:30 today that she's probably going to meet Ellen DeGeneres, who also tweeted about it. I mean, her story, Ellen DeGeneres tweeted about it, Ashton Kutcher, Martina Navratilova, CNN, NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox, KSL News even sent out a tweet about it. It was news pretty much everywhere in the world but Utah. I was disappointed with the coverage that they got in Utah, but it is what it is. But that is sharing Savannah's story is by far the one thing that I am the most proud of. I know I told you this a few weeks ago or a month ago, whatever, that if I was given a choice and told you have to remove either all of your temple videos or wipe Savannah's testimony off of the face of the internet, no contest. My videos would be gone in a heartbeat, because my videos, although may occasionally save a life here or there, they mostly just save people 10% of their income for the rest of their life and a lot of pain and heartache. Savannah's testimony saves lives. I have had people contact me. I had a man in his 50s contact me and tell me he's LDS, he's gay, nobody knows, and he said, if a 12-year-old little girl can get up and be honest, then so can I. And he said, I'm telling everybody today that I am gay, and he's a 51-year-old man. She has courage that I have never witnessed before. And I told Savannah when I met with her, I believe the two most important dates in your life and everyone's lives are the day we came into this world and the day we discover why we came into this world. And I told her, for you, June 21st, 2004, the day you came into this world, and the reason the day you found out why you came into this world, I think was May 7th, 2017, when you realized that you are a voice for millions of people who don't have the courage to speak. And she's saving lives. There's no doubt about it. That kid's my hero.
So you started Behind the Veil series to keep Mitt Romney from becoming elected, but it sounds like it's come to mean much more. So if you had to summarize now why you continued doing Behind the Veil, it was, and the Savannah stuff, it was what?
Just to get the truth out there. I mean, people deserve the truth. Little girls growing up Mormon deserve to know that the wedding of their dreams, if you ask any little girl, tell me what your dream wedding would be like, I'm pretty sure it would include music. It would include walking down an aisle. It would include flower girls. It would include the dress of their dreams. It would include standing at the altar, looking their husband in the eye and proclaiming their love, or wife, and proclaiming their love. And none of those, you get none of those in a Mormon wedding. In most cases, Mormon brides can't even wear the dress of their dreams because it doesn't fit the modesty standards of the temple. And then they're wearing this green apron, and they're kneeling across an altar, and they're not allowed to look at each other. At least at my wedding and the wedding that I recorded and posted online, and from every experience I've talked to, in most cases, the officiator makes it clear, look at me, don't look at each other, you look at me. And the word love is nowhere in the ceremony. Literally, they don't say love in the ceremony because it's not about love. It's about the church, and they give them a little pep talk beforehand, and it's all about paying your tithing and going to church and going to the temple and paying your tithing. And
not to mention in the endowment ceremony, women covenanting to hearken unto their husband as their husband hearkens.
How weird is that when you're a sister missionary going on a mission, you're going through the temple for the first time, and you're making a covenant to obey a husband that you haven't even met yet. It's just weird.
Let alone that you don't have a direct connection to God,
Yeah.
and that a man has to bring you through the veil.
So it's so misogynistic. People deserve to know the truth. Little girls deserve to know what the wedding will really look like.
Right.
Potential converts in the world deserve to know what they're getting
marrying,
into. And people who are active, faithful members of the church who have been through the temple deserve to know there is no power of discernment in the temple. If there's one thing my videos have proven, that is your power of discernment either doesn't exist, or every single person I've encountered in every temple for the last 15 years lacks the Spirit.
Yeah, when you spent that time assuming the the identity of someone else, and you recorded those meetings with your bishop and I guess stake president or whoever interviewed you, the fact that they had no idea you were an ex-member and were assuming a false identity, and that God didn't clue them in at all to who they were working with, and that they deemed you worthy to go into the temple, and that you indeed got your temple recommend and went to the temple. That, for me, I mean, I'm not condoning that behavior, but what struck me about watching those videos was these guys have no connection with the divine if they're letting you, if they're deeming you as worthy, and then they're allowing you to have a temple recommend and go through the temple. To what extent do they have the right to deem a young 12 or 13-year-old boy or girl as worthy in front of Christ?
I absolutely. In 2013, when they changed they made the new temple movies, starting July 30th, 2013. As soon as I heard they made a new temple movie, I knew I got to go back. I gotta get the new movies recorded. And then I realized, you know what? I never recorded a sealing ceremony. I never recorded a washing and anointing ceremony. I never recorded the confirmation for the dead ceremony. So I knew July 30th, 2013, I knew I'm going back and I'm going to make a sequel, Behind the Veil 2. And it was a project that was literally 3 years in the making. It was meticulously planned down to pretty much the minutest detail. I was living in California. I was living in Utah at the time, but I moved to California. People knew I lived in California. I moved to Arizona in January of 2016, and I told nobody. Keep in mind, I've got 3 kids, my mother, my employer. Nobody knew. I worked from home, so nobody knew I was living in Arizona. I mean, nobody. I called church headquarters. I I found somebody who was willing to let me assume his identity. And I found him by, I put a little comment on a private Facebook group that has about 2,000 ex-Mormons in it. In fact, part of it said, let's see, where is it? The little post I said, I claimed that I was talking to a member of a national magazine looking for an article. I need some quotes from 2 or 3 men who meet the following criteria. Preferably a returned missionary, must be single, divorced is fine, must have received their endowments between 1984 and 1990, and must have been an active temple-worthy member within the past 3 years, but are no longer active, but you must still be on the membership rolls. No ex-Mormons allowed. And I said, if you're interested in helping with this, do not comment here, contact me privately. And I had about 20 people, men, contact me and said, yeah, I received my endowments in 86, whatever.
Meet the criteria.
I whittled that list of potential candidates down to 3 and called them all and talked to them on the phone one at a time and basically said, I need to borrow your identity, essentially. I want to play you for anywhere from 3 months to a year. And I didn't even tell him what state I was living in. I just said, I just need you to trust me. And I need to know if you're willing to help. I'm making a sequel to Behind the Veil, and I need to know everything about you. And I mean everything. The day you were born, where you work, when you got married, the names of your children's, their birth dates, what your favorite hobby is, where you went on a mission, everything. And I had one person that was just the perfect candidate. Not only was he a high priest, he was a returned missionary. He's divorced after 25 years. He had 4 kids, one of whom was a son on a mission. And he moved about a year and a half before this and didn't tell anybody where he was living because he went inactive and the church lost track of him. And I knew this is a perfect candidate. And I said to him, you got to trust me. I'm begging you because you are the perfect person. Let me be you for the next 3 months to a year. And I knew it could take a year.
Have you publicly released this man's identity?
Sort of, kind of. I mean, I've shared it in a couple of private ex-Mormon groups. The church knows who he is. I mean, because I used his name, I gave the church my real address. So I called church headquarters. I said, membership department. I said, hey, I'm moving to Arizona. I haven't really been active, but I want to get back into the church. Can you tell me what ward I'd be attending and what time they meet? And they told me. And so I showed up April 10th of 2016 and introduced myself as this guy and said, I moved out here. I'm taking care of my 94-year-old grandmother who has Alzheimer's. And I don't know how long I'll be here. It might be 3 weeks. It might be 3 years. But I'm new to the ward, and pleasure to meet you. And the very first Sunday, like the gospel doctrine teacher said something like, there's no archaeological evidence for the Book of Mormon. We're not going to find any, and I think that's for a reason. And I was like, did he just say that? And I had my phone at the time. I just had my phone in my pocket, and I was recording video. So that very first Sunday on April 10th, I knew, okay, I got to go to the temple still, but this is where the story is. The story's in the church on Sunday every week. There would somebody get up and they would bear their testimony and say, my brother left the church, my sister, I think the second Sunday, maybe the third one, the high priest group leader got up and was in tears talking about how his daughter had left the church and son-in-law, and there's this constant talk of apostasy. Everybody's talking about their friends and family members leaving the church. And I started taking more cameras, and it got to the point where I had, by the time I left, I mean, I'd go into the temple. I was a full tithe payer, and I got around that by claiming that I had a brain aneurysm, and a year and a half before had brain surgery and had took a leave of absence from work. So that's why I hadn't paid tithing for a year and a half. And now, right before I go back to work, my ailing grandmother needs help. I referred to her. I said, my grandmother is a rabidly anti-Mormon. She has emphasized she does not want missionaries or home teachers in her home, and I'm trying to respect that. I get out of the house literally 3 hours per week, and it's to come to church on Sunday, and it is like a sanctuary to me. And I did pay a generous fast offering. I give him $50 a month for 2 months. I didn't pay in April, but I paid him $50 in May and $50 in June, and
You didn't pay tithing then.
didn't pay a dime.
You didn't want to.
I no, absolutely not. I wanted to pay as little as possible, and because I wasn't working, I told the bishop, it's real easy to be a full tithe payer when you don't have a job. And when I interviewed with the stake president, I told him I think it was 85 lies in 12 minutes. I actually put in that episode. I made a series, I'm actually still making it, called The Making of Behind the Veil 2, because I thought the whole process of making it was more interesting than the actual Behind the Veil 2. And one of my episodes, I have my interview with the bishop, and another one I have my interview with the stake president. And the interview with the stake president, I have on the screen a lie-o-meter and a discern-o-meter. And every time I lied, I got a point. Every time he caught me in a lie, he would get a point. It's kind of a blowout. I'll be honest with you. He did not do well. The stake president also typically sat in front of me in high priest group. And now I know that particular video, I've had people say, dude, you were really harsh on the guy. I mean, you were brutal. Because after I left the church, my last day in church was July 3rd of 2016. It was Fast Sunday. I got up, bore my testimony. It was spectacular. And then I left and I started making phone calls.
Was it a non-testimony? Was it a...
I've posted a very small part of it online, but I talk about, well, let me put it this way. I ended my testimony with, I know this church is through. It's just not true. And I just walked out, and the faces of everybody in the audience was just, jaws were dropping. Keep in mind, the week before this, I taught the high priest group, and for 40 minutes, I talked about the problems with the church, and discussed everything from the Book of Abraham to the anachronisms in the Book of Mormon. I mean, I spent 40 minutes teaching the high priest group, talking about the problems with the church and the historicity of the church.
Do you say what city this was in?
It's in Phoenix. I don't identify the ward. I generally blur all the faces. If I do use names, there's a couple of cases where I'll mention their first name. Steve, the counselor in the stake presidency, who sat in front of me in high priest group, who signed my temple recommend that allowed me to go into the temple. Honestly, if I was a Mormon, I would say he didn't have the spirit. And truly, I mean that. I mean, I think 99.9% of Mormons and those in leadership are good, honest, sincere people. Bishops, stake presidents, in most cases, my opinion, they are the salt of the earth. I really think they're good people. But once in a while, you find a bishop or a stake president that just, your gut just tells you, this guy doesn't have the spirit. I don't know why he's in the position he's in. Maybe it's because he needs it more than they need. I don't know. All I know is there's some people you just don't have a good feeling about. And Steve, the counselor that signed in the stake president, signed my temple recommend, he was one of those people. Didn't like him. Didn't like him from the minute I met him. In fact, I have on video our recommend interview, which was the first time I met him, and I also have on video the last time I met him. I got up and blew their minds and walked out the front door of the chapel. If you listen carefully, you'll see that I walked out the front doors of the chapel singing Hasadiga Ibowai. It was very, very...
Not dramatic at all.
Yeah. Well, now keep in mind, that was to myself. They did not hear me singing that. I'll say the ward did not hear me singing it, but once I walked out the front door, oh yeah, I was singing it as I was walking back to my car. That was day 84. For 84 days, I went from being an ex-Mormon for 15 years, basically, and not stepping foot inside of a chapel. Granted, I've been into a few temples, but hadn't stepped foot in a chapel in 15 years. I went from that to being a full-fledged, active, faithful, well, as far as they were concerned, member of the church with a calling, with a home teacher assigned to me, bore my testimony every Sunday, and I went to the temple a lot.
Right.
And it kind of did a job on me, I'll be honest with you. I felt like I was intentionally schizophrenic. because every day on the way to church or on the way to the temple, I would be talking to myself, repeating out loud what the name was of the person that I was playing and what his, I was, saying these things out loud and just kind of memorizing it and memorizing, talking, saying the names of my 4 children and where my son was on a mission, everything. So if somebody struck up a conversation with me, I would have the answers. If they want to know, hey, so where did you go to school? I would know the answer. If they asked what I did for a living, I had the answer.
Right.
I only messed up one time. Somebody asked me for my phone number because he wanted me to teach the high priest group and asked me for my phone number. And I had an alternate phone number, but I hadn't memorized it. So I had to go, you know what? I just got a new phone. Give me a second. Let me look it up. And I had to look up my fake phone number. That was a valid number. He called me on it and we talked. But that was the only time I slipped up. 84 days.
That's amazing. I mean, it's unbelievable, really. So we're going to come back for a part 3 and just ask you some final questions. But as we're talking about identities and assumed identities and surveillance, what I'd like to do to end this episode is to swap you out with Jesse Stay. And I'm just going to ask Jesse a few questions. Is that okay?
Asshole, that Jesse stayed.
Okay. Come over here. Jesse, come on up. Mike, swap out. I'll talk as you guys are swapping.
Put your mic here.
So those of you who watch Mormon Stories will know that Jesse Stay worked for several years as leading several social media efforts in the church. And last night, early this morning, Jesse released an article where he talked.
Jesse did.
What?
Jesse did. No, you're fine.
What do you mean?
Mary did. Didn't
Oh,
she?
Mary,
Some
right,
lady
right,
named
right,
Mary.
right, right.
Mary Snap.
So Jesse shares with us what the church asked him to do in response to Mike Norton. And I'm bringing Jesse on because 1, it's tied to Mike Norton's story, but 2, for those of you who are like, oh my gosh, how could Mike be so dishonest? How could Mike assume a false identity? How could Mike do surveillance? That's so unethical. I'm not trying to say what the church does and what Mike done is of higher or lesser moral equivalence, but it's interesting. So Jesse, do you mind sharing with our audience what you were asked to do in relation
Sure.
to Mike in social media?
Yeah. So one of the things that you and I discussed in our interview was we talked about the how I used to listen to conversations on social media, and I was being a little cautious and wanted to be respectful to people there. I still want to be respectful to people there, but it's been 5 years, and I figure now is the time to talk about a little more about that. And one of my responsibilities there was to track security issues and some of the public affairs issues that would hurt the image of the church using social media. And one of those things, one of those issues was we had some guy named NewNameNoah going out.
Which was Mike's internet
his
YouTube
alias,
name,
yep.
his alias, yeah.
Yep, and going out, and at the time I called it, he was going out and breaking into the temples and sharing them on YouTube. And I mean, as a large multinational organization, I mean, that operates like a business, I mean, the image of the church was at stake. Here there was a sacred element of Mormonism that was now being exposed online, and I had become known there for I helped a few various things. I mean, I kept. I shared things with public affairs about you, in fact, at the time, and I helped out with various things surrounding the. There was this whole thing at one point on Mormon.org where people would troll it with how do magnets work, and I helped them come up with some strategies on how to that. And from there, they came to me when I can't remember if I pointed it out or someone else came to me, but one or the other. And when Mike started sharing these videos on YouTube, they came to me asking for help, and first identifying who it was, because in his first videos, which I still have somewhere. In fact, I think there's one on this lady named Mary shared a while back, but his first videos, he didn't identify his name, and he became more and more public over time. But we needed to know who he was, so that we could identify him and know where he was, what he was doing. Is this a legitimate threat to security in any way, and how should we approach it? This was also all during the Mitt Romney campaign. There were a lot of questions, and a lot of attention was being brought to the church as a result of the Mitt Romney campaign. Our position was that we were not taking a political role, but there was a lot of interest. And now with a man suggesting that he had video of Mitt Romney,
in the temple ceremony.
In the temple ceremony.
Being involved in the temple ceremony. He was saying he had footage of that.
Yes. Yeah, and in the temple ceremony, he was saying he had footage, so we had legitimate concern from a public relations standpoint that there would be a lot of attention on this sacred ceremony that had never been exposed before, that would come out if Mitt Romney's video were released, and I think that's pretty clear to anyone. If a video of Mitt Romney in the temple were to come out, Mike was clear. He was threatening that he was talking to New York Times and other big publications, and as a result, if that had gotten out, it would have brought that video into the mainstream press. It would have brought huge attention to the church, and the church needed to know how to respond. So yeah, I was tracking that.
So what'd you do?
So one of the things I did, I started by just I as a kid, I always wanted to be a private investigator, and it was kind of I was kind of achieving my dream come true here. I had this opportunity. I was being asked to go and learn more about him. So I went on. First of all, I started searching Google. I got on every single ex-Mormon forum out there, public forum, not Facebook at this time. I didn't want to associate my public profile with any anti-Mormon. I hate that term, by the way, but any of those types of groups. So I went in anonymously to online forums like xmormon.org, to there's the New Order Mormon, I think it's newordermormon.org, various forums online, and then started using Google and other tools to start and look and figure out where who is this NewNameNoah, and there happened to be a post some time ago where Mike was identifying himself by NewNameNoah along with his name. I can't remember exactly where, but I probably got a screenshot of it somewhere. But I pulled that out and was able to connect the name Mike Norton with NewNameNoah. At that point, I went and checked out his Facebook profile, which wasn't public. It was a private profile, but it had some public posts on it, and was able to gradually kind of extract that, yeah, this guy is the same guy as this Mike Norton, who's NewNameNoah. Went in, started going through likes and shares and comments on his public posts, and was able to go through other people's profiles, and they had more information on him. And as I started to do that, I started to get enough information where I started to build a fake profile on Facebook, who just outed me. I can't.
So what was her name?
Her name was Mary Snap.
So it's a fake profile that you created.
I created Mary Snap, and Mary.
How did you use Mary?
So Mary, I created this fake profile. She was. I found a picture of just some random. I don't even know.
Doesn't
who the
matter.
lady is.
Just
yeah.
So you created the fake
Yeah,
profile,
so-
and then how'd you use it?
Oh, so I took this, and the first thing I did is I started friending Mike's friends. At this point I knew who his family was. I knew all sorts of information.
And were you feeding
about
this
Mike.
information?
I've talked to Mike about this.
Were you
before.
feeding this information to the church as you were gathering it?
Yeah, and this was all going to the information security group at the church, they knew I had
Under a
fake-
false identity.
It was under a false identity. They knew I had a false identity. They would tell me they technically don't condone it, but they let me continue doing it. They never told me to stop. I'm under no impression that they still do it. I don't know for sure if they've ever continued. I seem to be one of the only people doing it at the time that I knew of. But they did. They tracked public conversations and such. But with this, I took the profile. I joined other ex-Mormon groups. I ended up building enough of a friends list where it looked legitimate enough that I was able to friend Mike eventually. I think it's still friends with Mike. Just last night, I went into each of the ex-Mormon groups and with this profile posted each one just to show that there is no privacy in these groups, and it's not my own personal intention to diminish or hurt the privacy or make people feel less private in these groups. I wanted to bring out that point that none of these groups are safe online, that anything you share online can be shared, and especially if you're trying to protect yourself from I'm under no impression that the church was doing anything wanting to do, they weren't looking for random people out there. They were looking for people that were malicious to either the identity or security. But if you are a threat to that and you're posting in these groups, you could be a potential target.
It can and will be used against you in a court of love.
Can and will be used against you in a court of love, Mike says. So, yeah. So I felt really hesitant in sharing this, but I do feel that. I think it's still fairly respectful to the church. I don't think I think it's kind of been an ongoing knowledge that no one has ever been willing to admit that there is tracking that goes on out there, and that's what whether any big organization does this. It's no secret. Every big organization out there, if there is a PR or a security threat, they're going to do what they can to find that threat.
And talk about what the church prepared in response to their fears about the videos coming out. What did they prepare for the media?
Sure. So one of the a fun story was Mike had, in a few private groups, had shared that there was a specific date. He called it the October surprise, if I'm remembering right. There might have been another date, but I think this was the same one. And in this October surprise, I had enough credible information that it was going to be the video of Mitt Romney in the temple. I swear I saw either a screenshot or I saw this video somewhere at one point to where it was credible enough that I believed it. And we had the exact date, the time he was going to do it. He was talking to someone in the mainstream media, or a few people in the mainstream media, about the potential of it. And it was enough to be worried that this was going to go out. At that point, we hadn't really done anything. There just was no reason. I mean, the church truly does believe that the temple is sacred, not secret, and I think that's why Mike still hasn't been arrested. And I think that's I don't know any of the recent details, but anyway, we actually had a video in response to that ready that we produced. I think it was in like 2 days. We produced this video as a response to that was the most revealing video. It includes pictures of the garments in it and their nice pretty packaging, has a whole history of sacred clothes and other things, and we from there we were all ready to release it because we knew he was going to do it. At that point, we probably would have pursued charges against Mike. I think I was out of my hands. I don't know for sure, and at that point we were all ready, and Mike ended up not releasing the video in the end. And I've heard some of his reasons. I'll let him share that if you
Talk
want to
about
get
that in
to
the next segment.
Yeah, but at that point, I think we held on to the video for quite some time at that point, and I think it was years down the road they ended up releasing it. I think on Mormon Newsroom as well as Mormon Channel as an actual video, and it's out there. And Mike was the instigator for and the reason behind them creating that video.
Thank you, Jesse, for being willing to share that. And I'll just end this segment just by saying there's a lot of people who have very strong opinions about how change happens in the church. And even recently, faithful Mormons or liberal Mormons or progressive Mormons that I know have made efforts to exclude ex-Mormons or post-Mormons or non-believing Mormons from various initiatives because of this conviction that you can't make changes in the church if you're an outsider. The only way to make changes in the church is as a believer from the inside. And whether it's the Godmakers film that Mike referenced that he doesn't have a lot of affection for, we know that the Godmakers film is responsible for many of the significant changes that have happened in the temple ceremony because of the references in that book, whether it's the robes that Satan wore, whether it's the way that it bashed on a Christian preacher in the temple, whether it's the way that we've distanced ourselves from the theology of theosis and how man can become gods. So much of the change, and of course,
I know God. He was my grandfather.
Right. And then of course the all the changes around the use of the initiatory and the apron and the removal of the penalties. Those can all be traced to the legitimate concerns that were raised in the Godmakers. And then we look at what Mike Norton has done in terms of changing the church's security system, and then of course what Jesse just shared, and how that led to the church being open and public about garments and the temple ceremony. I think it's pretty much irrefutable. And then if you think back to the pressure on the church to get rid of polygamy, the pressure on the church to change its stance on excluding blacks from the priesthood and from temple access, whatever it is pretty hard to argue that external pressures don't make substantive changes in the church. And in fact, if you look at any substantive change probably ever made within the Mormon church, you can probably tie it to external pressures made where things were made public. And so I'll be honest, I'm ambivalent talking about these issues. Part of me feels really, honorific to sort of some of these efforts, and then part of me feels this really sick feeling in my stomach that we're doing this sort of discussion. But sort of at the end of the day, as I think about it, I think this is how change happens in Mormonism. Savannah, this video of Savannah gets leaked. People do really crazy hard things because they're sick of the suicides and they're sick of the divorces and the families being torn apart. And so often it's these harsh, sometimes questionably ethical tactics that end up being the main reasons why the church changes. And so as a way to just sort of put a capstone on this episode, these are difficult issues. I'm torn with the ethics and the morals of these issues. It's not fun or giddy for me to be sort of rolling around in the mud on these issues. And I'm just aware that and I'm kind of trying to shine a light on the idea that this is how change happens in modern Mormonism. And we wish that there were a grassroots way for members to affect change. We wish that the leaders maybe were a little bit more in touch with all the bad things that were happening. But unfortunately, so often the leaders turn a blind eye to the pain and the suffering and to the advice that's given. They ignore the grassroots concerns. When anyone sends a letter to church headquarters, it's redirected back to the stake president and the bishop. And oftentimes those people are punished for providing the feedback. And so until the church provides more humane mechanisms for feedback, until the church shows more willingness to listen and care about the concerns of the average day member and the collateral damage that's happening in their lives when certain policies end up hurting people in their everyday lives, these are going to be the methods that end up making change. And I just look forward to the day where these sorts of things, Mike's tactics aren't necessary, Jesse's confessions aren't necessary, podcasts like this aren't necessary, because the church is just inherently ethical and transparent and humane, and they care about what's happening in the lives of their members, so they don't have to be shamed and publicly forced to make those sorts of changes. So that's my hope. That's my little sermon. Thank you for joining us for part 2 of this interview with Mike Norton. Thanks to Jesse Stay for his willingness to share his story. Thanks to Mike for his heartfelt testimonies as well. We're going to break, have some pizza, and we'll be right back for part 3 with some final questions to Mike about what drives him. And we'll push back a little bit and challenge him on some of his tactics and methods. And hopefully we'll enjoy a few questions from the audience as well. So thanks, everybody. Join us in right back now for part 3 of our interview with Mike Norton. Take care.